Very good afternoon to all our esteemed speakers, Professor Dr. Sanjukta Bhaduri, Professor of Urban Planning from SPA New Delhi, Dr. Anshu Sharma, co-founder of Seeds New Delhi, and Sri Parthasarathi Sahu, Head Technical Cell of Orissa Urban Housing Mission, delegates, guests, and students. On behalf of Pilur Modi College of Architecture, Cuttack, a premier institute in the Eastern Zone, imparting education since the last 27 years, I welcome you all to this webinar on inclusive housing, jointly being organized under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. And our trust as a college has always been on gainful exposure of our students to challenges and best practices in the field of architecture and planning, which we undertake through collaborative workshops and research with government agencies as well as the private sector. The current webinar is also an outcome of this endeavor. Our state partner in this webinar is Orissa Urban Housing Mission, Government of Orissa. With that, I welcome you all once again to this webinar and hope you will enjoy the deliberations. And now I will hand over the proceedings to our faculty member, Professor Deepashri Chaudhary, who will be convening and who will be moderating the sessions, taking one from.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm honored to be called to moderate the session. Just 1 minute. So, thank you very much, Dharitri ma'am. I'm honored to be called to moderate the session today. As we know, today's theme of deliberation is inclusive housing. The contemporary world is facing unprecedented urban challenges like unregulated population growth, unplanned habitat expansion, resource crunch, increasing disaster vulnerability, and many more. So providing affordable and adequate housing to its citizens has emerged a prominent challenge across the world, including India. According to census, estimated 65 million people are housed in urban slums, comprising 17 to 24% of country's urban residents. Under these circumstances, adoption of inclusive housing becomes very relevant for the development of successful and sustainable cities. Even all 11 United Nations SDGs, which aspires to make cities and human settings inclusive, safe, resilient, reiterates the same. To keep it short, though housing has many different definitions in context, simply put, it entails providing housing options throughout the city for people from all walks of life, all ages, races, ethnicities, and abilities. Inclusive housing options represent a wide variety of housing types, sizes, and prices that keeps equitable access for people in the urban community. So keeping this context in mind, the webinar is conducted under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, a flagship mission of Government of India being implemented by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which aims at addressing the urban housing shortage among EWS, LIG, and MIG categories, including the slum dwellers. Today's webinar has following objectives: to deliberate, discuss, disseminate, and share learnings and knowledge on housing in urban spaces among various stakeholders belonging to varied streams of learning, capacity building, and generation of multiple stakeholders' engagement relating to various domains of inclusive housing. So, after this brief introduction, I invite the first esteemed speaker of the day, Sri Parthasarathi Sahu. Sir has completed his Master's in Social Work and Management Study from United Kingdom. Since 2019, he is working as team leader, Orissa Urban Housing Mission. He has more than 18 years of working experience in India, Africa, and United Kingdom in different portfolios, which include stints with renowned organizations like Save the Children, Action Aid International, United Nations Population Fund, National Health Services Trust, United Kingdom, and Voluntary Service Overseas Africa. Today, Sir will share his experience and learning outcomes from PMAU Urban and implementation processes with us. I welcome you, sir, to the speaker's desk.
Thank you very much. Very good afternoon, all of you. Respected Professor Dharitri Das ma'am, Principal PMCH, respected Professor Deepasree Chaudhary ma'am, respected Anshu Sharma ma'am, Professor Dr. Sanjukta Paduri, and Professor Maitri ma'am. Thank you very much. It's a great privilege, and it's a really great honor to be part of your team and sharing the experience. This is regarding this program is basically Awaaz per Samvad. If you can just, I'll give you two quick example. Awaaz per Samvad is an integral part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. So if you know, we are celebrating 75th of Independence Day, where the Ministry of Urban Housing and Affairs, they are celebrating Amrit Mahotsav. Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav means basically, if you think, they are more focusing on the housing and urban development. So in this particular event, yes, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. You can go on.
Okay. PMOI, which it was started in 2015 June, and throughout the country, the basic aim is to provide housing for all. Basically, those people who have able to afford the housing, like EWS, LIG, and MIG category people. So as I say, housing is one of the basic necessity of human lives. I think everybody would agree with me. So if you have if there's 100 participants, I'm sure people are investing the entire money to get a house, to get a own house. So as saying roti kapda makan, it's a basic human needs, and nowadays it's a housing become a more valuable subject or valuable things which we are able to afford, or we can sometimes we cannot afford to get having a own house. So in this regard, if you can see, like there is a lot of changes from rural area to urban, like people are migrating in search of their livelihood, in search of their if you talk about getting the healthcare facility, the education facility. So people, the demographically, migrating past few years, it is, you can see the city is very limited, and people are migrating from one place to another major cities. If you are talking about Odisha, people are migrating to Bhubaneswar, Cuttack, or Rourkela, or Berhampur to in search of their livelihood. Secondly, in that case, we are working, or Odisha Urban Housing Mission, we are working in 114 ULBs, urban local bodies across the state, which is including 5 municipal corporation and 9 development authority, and we have all the municipal and NAC. So around, if you say the housing demand says around 4.5 lakhs, which is more than half of population living in the slum area alone. So you can imagine the density of population, especially those are economically poor people. They are staying in the slum area, which you can, if you can pass by any railway station or any hospitals, any kind of sites, you'll see the people who are they don't have a house to live. They're settling in the slum areas, or urban population. They're contributing to the urban population. PMI housing scheme is implemented in urban Odisha basically to understand how the state has been benefit in terms of housing studies. From this, the state nodal agency as a OHM, as a total nodal agency, we are working in the 3 verticals. Basically, the first one is BLC, beneficiary-led construction, AHP, affordable housing, and institute slum redevelopment. And by total 2022, we are thinking to, the ambitious is we are giving to maximum numbers of people who are homeless. If I can give you the statistics, ma'am, in 2015, before it was PMI lunch, if you can imagine after 75th of independence, only Odisha has constructed only maximum 25,000 numbers of house across the state. So I'm just giving the scenario, giving the journey, how it is, started after during the PMI when it started in 2015, and we come to the operation in 2017. In 2017, the only they have constructed 8 houses in the entire state. So then, because of our leadership of our mission director and joint mission director, till now we have sanctioned 1,89,000, including different verticals, and I'm happy to say almost we have in BLC we have completed 72,000 houses. People are living right now in 3 years, 4 years time. And the most is AHP ISSR also we have completed 8 to 9,000. In our mission, we have planning to complete another 30 to 40,000 households within a couple of months. So this is our target. In regards to that, we have, if you can heard about, Odisha has come up with a historic legislation, Odisha Land Rights to Slum Dweller Act, which is passed in 2017. To grant the institute it was survey in 2,500 slums across 109 municipality on NAC, around 1.2 million population, which is been surveyed, and the Odisha government has taken a very drastic step. Those are people who are living in the unsettlement area, or they are fear of eviction. So Odisha government is trying to give the LRC certificate, land rights certificate, which is they can stay in the area minimum 30 to 60 square meter of land, and once they have received the LRC certificate, they can apply for the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is a really historical steps for Odisha. In this context, almost we have till now we have given almost 30,000 LRC, and out of that 21,000 who have received already PMI houses during the Slum Dwellers Act. Secondly, if you talk about AHP and ISSR, the government has also come up with the new policy. It was before that the PPP, public-private partnership, which was the government of India has amended recently. It was during the AHP. It was 35% for the developer and 60% for the AHP area. But now it has completely different to attract the more developer. The policy has been changed into, like, suppose a 10-acre land, if we are giving for a PPP project, out of 10 acres, the 40% which the developer should make a EWS housing, and rest 60% they can give a they can develop their own commercial purpose. So this is the things. I think I don't want to speak much about this housing, and this is really, and I'm happy to share, like, in our team we have 72 civil engineer professional who was completed their BTech, have been working across the Odisha to supporting this process. And apart from that, we have a state team. We have comprised of financial expert, PPP expert, urban planner, and social development expert. So they are also working hand in hand, and they are giving so much effort in terms of mobilization, in terms of giving our support. We are trying to. This is the major challenge after the COVID pandemic. Everybody has we are also lost our. Some people have lost our job, and especially those who are working daily laborers. You can imagine their situation. So in this case, we are trying to encourage more PLIs, Public Lending Institute, to provide the money, support the money to complete their houses. I have some videos which I would like to share. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I just wanted to show some real experience how we are not giving a house. Only we try to put the families to put a smile on their face. There is a lot of if you talk about this 70,000 house we completed, there is a different stories. Like every house has a different stories. How people are struggling, how they are complete these houses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your insightful presentation. It has rightfully deepened our understanding about the importance and outcomes of PMAY.
मो ना उल्लास भाई मो स्वामी के ना बेमुधर भाई आमर भुवनेश्वर 23 नंबर वार्ड रे आम बासिंदा आम आगे चाल घर थेलु चाल घर ओदा मदा यही कांथ जरी टांगी थेलु वर्षा ओदा होथेलु बहुत असुविधा रे आम चलुथेलु नवीन बाबू आ मोदी सरकार देले हमको घर हमको लक्ष्मी देले चलवा को भारी सुविधा आमर भारी खुशी अच्छु आम असुविधा आमर किसी ना आम भारी सुविधा अच्छु भल खुशी अच्छु धन्यवाद जनाऊँ.
Right now, I will invite the second speaker of the day, Dr. Anshu Sharma. So, Dr. Anshu Sharma is a co-founder of Seeds. He has trained as an urban planner at the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. And he did his doctoral research in global environmental studies at Kyoto University, Japan. Dr. Anshu is known for his abundance of ideas. He has a keen interest in systems thinking, innovations, and capacity building within the humanitarian sector. A professional trainer, he has been a driving force behind Seeds, frontline disaster trainings, and is a global tutor for Oxford Brookes University. Dr. Anshu has also pioneered initiatives such as a disaster preparedness innovation lab in Bangladesh and climate schools in Sikkim. Today, sir is going to enlighten us with a presentation on global innovation and best practices in affordable housing. I request you to begin your session, sir.
Thank you, Professor Debashri, Professor Dharitri, and everyone at Pilu Modi College of Architecture for creating this very nice event and inviting all of us here. I think Sanjeev ji said, and he set the tone very well of what the need is and how we need to be sensitive in this work. This is more than pure architecture. There is a very strong social dimension. There is an economic dimension. There is a sensitivity to this kind of work. We couldn't hear the end audio, but we can all understand the value that it brings on how you could see good visuals reaching out to people who normally don't have access to such services. So I think this session is great. It is the kind of session that many years ago inspired me, instead of going into commercial architecture and planning kind of work, to take a path which is more socially oriented. I hope there may be some youngsters in this call who will similarly feel inspired to take these alternative routes in practice. So I'll do two things before I talk about global practices, etc. In fact, I have decided to split my few minutes in three parts. I want to talk about something very contextual that is happening. So at a national level, concerns of the day. I'll talk about a few principles that I have learned out of various practices. And before that, I'll show you a few images of the kind of work we do at Seeds, where I work as a non-profit organization. And finally, I'll conclude with the logic, a very good global thinking logic that I can leave with you as a thought. So if you allow me to share my screen, and it's going to be a little messy sharing that I will do, because I do intend to switch around a couple of things. Now I'm going to, let me start from here, share a little video which some of you may have seen between yesterday and today. Professor Debashri, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible.
So I
Yes,
don't
sir.
know if thank you. I don't know if you've received this, but this is a video that has been doing the rounds
Yes.
since yesterday. This is a building in Shimla. Let me just a few
Yes,
seconds
sir.
I'll play. So if you haven't already seen it, this is on a number of news channels. If you Google Shimla multi-story building collapse, you will find this video. This happened yesterday in a locality, yesterday morning in a locality called Kachi Ghati in Shimla. And it's a very classic example of how there is risk in the communities that we work with on a day-to-day basis. I work in an area of disaster management and responding to disasters. But, you know, when we talk about disasters, we assume very large earthquakes, cyclones, and such events. But this is something that happens in the city of Shimla and many other cities every year. This happens in Shimla every year after the rains. And I'm going to now switch to sharing my screen on a few slides as a slide deck. I hope you can see my screen now. Okay. And this is, let me also maximize this. This is, you know, work. This image is from a few years ago from some work that I was doing as part of a Seeds team in the city of Shimla. And what we saw was actually an even larger building, but these buildings grow over time. So as you can very clearly see, this must have been the first two floors, the ground and first floor must have been built in one go. They are looking rather similar. And then after every few years, one floor has got added. And the greed has grown to expand a little more, to project out a little more, gain a few more square feet of space because it's commercially viable and it's attractive. And there's no consideration of the slope that we are building on, of the kind of foundations that we have, and of the kind of strength that we are assuming this building to have. These are, they use engineering materials, but a lot of these buildings are what we call unengineered buildings. There is no engineer or architect involved, and they mushroom all across the slopes of Shimla, all other mountain cities, and all coastal and cities and those in the plains. So this is a national phenomenon. Why this image stands out in my memory, and I dug it out today, is because we tried to inquire how to fix this problem. Now, this building can come down even without an earthquake, you know, even after a heavy period of rains, as happened yesterday morning, when the soil is moist and heavy with the water, it can slip and the building can come tumbling down. So we wanted to figure out, how do you fix this? And there is the science of retrofitting. You can actually remove certain parts, strengthen certain parts, and try to fix it before you decide to build it, bring it down and rebuild such a building. And it was very interesting. So when we talk to the government authorities, we are told that there is a specific fund which is available for compensation and relief. But the government can provide that and unlock those funds only once the building collapses. So they can give aid after that, but there's nothing that can be done easily right now. We spoke to the owner who actually doesn't live here, and he's not interested in spending money. It would require a substantial sum to do something about this building. He will have to get all of these tenants who live here vacated. So his monthly income will go down for that, 6 months or a year period that it will go under repairs. And he really doesn't understand and is not worried about the risk. Finally, we spoke to the people who live here, whose lives are at risk. And they were surprisingly also not interested in anyone doing anything about this building, because they were here on a low rent and they assume for a short period and they would then move on. And if you try to fix the building, then you would immediately ask them to vacate and they would in any case have to leave. And once you've repaired the building, they may or may not want to come back and the rent will go up. So nobody wanted to fix this problem. This is the story of one building. There are hundreds of such buildings in the city, as I said, on the slope on which you saw one collapse yesterday. So from here, now I'll move to the topic of today, because this is something I thought was relevant to see as a practice. So in the next couple of minutes, I'll walk you through 5-6 slides of the kind of work I do and we do at Seeds, where we mostly work on post-disaster housing, but it is also an overlap with social housing. Many a times we ride on social housing programs to provide this post-disaster housing and the reconstruction that we do. So this is how we would start a consultation. It's not about the house to start with. The image is from Gujarat after an earthquake. We're trying to do a housing program there. And we start from the entire village. We try to understand the ecosystem, the way people see it and the way they find it of use and where they find hindrances. These are women who are talking about a water body, the village pond, how they get water and why that's important for the housing ecosystem. This is the view of a dhani. These are traditional houses in Rajasthan. This is a program we did after a major flood event in Rajasthan and in the district of Badmer. And what you see behind you is the traditional mud house with a thatch roof, but here you would notice that the walls are showing you a stabilized concrete earth blocks, which would be more resistant to future floods. But at the same time, the same circular dimension has been retained because that is more resistant to sandstorms and to earthquakes that often strike this part of the country. This is a housing program that we did in Leh, Ladakh after a major flood in 2010. What you see here is the principles remain the same, but the context is that it is a very, very cold area. The winter temperatures, while the summer temperatures in Badmer, the slide you saw before this, go up to 50 degrees Celsius, the winter temperatures in Changthang and parts of Leh go down to minus 50 degrees Celsius. So, it's really amazing that you have a 100-degree variation and the power grid freezes. There is no electricity during the winter. So this house has a trombe wall behind that glass facade that you see. It's a black wall a foot behind this glass, which gains and retains the heat so that the nights can be comfortable in these houses. I'll move from here. This is how rammed earth construction, which is very prevalent in Leh, is also useful thermally and is a low carbon local material that is used. This also is from Leh. We've done similar work in Tamil Nadu, which is using earth bags for construction of these buildings. And this is from Sikkim after an earthquake in 2011. This is a school that we rebuilt there. And here you see a hybrid form taking shape. So the community and the government do have a belief that for earthquake resistance, a framed RC frame structure works well. We do believe at our end that the local ICRA is really valuable. So here's a hybrid which uses a RC frame, but the infill is ICRA, so that still saves a lot of building material and energy and carbon footprints. Going beyond just the construction, this is how we work with local communities, local masons, homeowners, and we demonstrate to them how vernacular architecture can still work. We work in earthquake prone areas. This is from Himachal and Uttarakhand belt. But we say how simple retrofitting, simple introduction of technologies that can be implemented by local masons and understood by local families, they can really save you from damage and hurt. This is a house from Gorakhpur in a flood prone area near the riverbank, and how to identify how much of waterlogging and flooding happens annually, how a rat trap bond can actually help, how local materials can be used to do local low cost construction. So this is a range of uh, of work and practices and things that we've learned from a lot of places. But in the next few slides, I'm going to run through these principles. I see these principles split across these three themes. You need to think about your resources, you need to think about your actual shelter, and then you need to think about the settlement, which is the context in which you are setting this house or these few houses. I will quickly run through these and I'll not be spending too much time. There is always space in the Q&A session, and even after that, I'm available for anyone who would want to have a chat. But let me start from a good house, right? And we may give many definitions: a resilient house, a climate sensitive house, a house that is affordable, appropriate, technologies, this, that. But when you go and talk to people, they generally talk of just a good house, and everyone in the family may have a different definition of a good house. Someone may say that, can I dry my corn in this house? Someone may say, can the roof leak during the rains, and will you be able to protect us from that? Someone may want a private space to be in. So everyone has a slightly different definition. And it is very useful to start from arriving at a common definition of a good house. This will really help the families for whom we are doing this, and for us also in the design process. It sounds like a silly, simple thing, but this is where a lot of us get lost and we tie ourselves up in knots when we try to define the parameters of a design. So then there is capital and in-use costs. We must always keep in-use costs in mind, because that is what people will be recurring on a regular basis. There are activity spaces. You all do this. You learned it from your first year in architecture, but this varies. There is huge variations across geographies, across communities, and within communities. So the one thing I would like to say, that one size does not fit all. There is a global humanitarian standard of 3.5 meters square per person when you design in this space in the humanitarian context. In some exercise, try and figure out how that would work if you were to design such a house. Keep things simple, because if it's not, then it will not be replicable. Keep it simple, give them the tools to be able to do it and expand it later on, but also give very simple guidelines. There is always a tussle between traditional or modern. As a trained architect, you would have a love, and you would have a really romanticized view of the vernacular. And people, on the other hand, will want, their aspirations will be very urban. They would want a pakka house. They would want the kind of house that you live in the city. Why should they be stuck with what looks like very nice, beautiful vernacular to you, but is very uncomfortable for them at times? And that's where how you invest technology to make it better comes in. Figure out your harvest. Where will you get your material from? Laurie Baker's stuff is very relevant. It doesn't match with people's aspirations anymore. So if you want to do a little bit of aspiration meeting, but a little bit of localized stuff, how would you make that happen? There's a whole literature available on harvest mapping. You would consider cost and durability along with the availability and the distances that you're talking about. You would consider natural versus industrial, and there's no one single solution. There will have to be shades of gray in between. You must read about the donut economy and circular economies. There is so much conversation happening around us right now on how what we see as waste, in fact, in construction sector, what we see as construction waste or rubble is actually a resource. How in the years to come, you will need to become experts in how to recycle these resources and how to make these systems circular, so that you're not mining, you're not burning, you're not cutting somewhere else to build these houses, but you're able to recycle and you're able to return material to the earth. Concrete has been a favorite material in social housing programs, and we need to not just question it, which we mostly do as architects, but also figure out how to make friends with it and how to find the right balance to be able to take this. Figure out the strength of manual. While the world is right now talking and everyone's is enamored with 3D printing of houses, we see a lot of those videos. I'm sure someone would be doing pilots in India also. But the economy that we come from and the societal setup that we come from has value for what people can do with their hands. It still has that. It will continue to have it for at least a few more decades. See the value of what people can do. See the value of all stuff passive and how that can be brought in. So the moment we move to social housing and housing, somehow they become in the country. So I spoke about aspirations earlier, but I also want to stress on it once more that people aspire. They aspire to have a better life next year and the year after, and 5 years from now when their children will grow up and be educated. And so it's important for these houses to be expandable, for these houses to be upgradable, and this to be done partly fed by the technology that you're bringing and the knowledge that you're bringing, but partly also fed by local wisdom, local innovations, local aspirations, and how that can be adaptable. Can you not be fixated on the idea of a house design that you have made on your drawing or your model, but can people play around with that? Can they add to it, subtract from it? Can they adapt it to something else? Can they work this around their livelihoods? The other thing that social housing programs done in the Matchbox way do is they take people away from their livelihoods, and that's why they falter on a lot of things. Is it possible to be creative in our designs, to be able to say that, oh, here we have a solution which is resilient, it meets the codes, it is providing the kind of space that we require, but at the same time, it is also making space for what people need to carry on their traditional practices of livelihoods, of getting access to networks and services that they would need, which may also tie to some of their local lifestyles, to bring in new technologies, but also bring in attitudinal and behavioral change. You can build a toilet, but you can't make a person go to that toilet if he hasn't or she hasn't used a toilet in his or her life. So how does an architect become the bearer of behavior change communications? How do you become part psychologist to be able to make this change and to make your infrastructure work and make it happen? How do you deal with waste? And I've earlier spoken about how waste can actually be seen as a resource, which right now is at the wrong place at the wrong time, but can be turned into a resource by putting it in the right place and putting the timing right. I come from the area of disaster management, so I always speak about safety, how you would build in safety in the culture, but also in the infrastructure, in the systems that you're setting up there. And to do all of this, not be just the deliverer of drawings and models. The real job of an architect, if you work in the social space and if you want to enter social housing and such stuff, is to engage with people, to find friends in the community, to communicate with them directly, to figure out where you will meet challenges in making behavioral change and identify champions to be able to do that. We could actually have a separate session on this someday in its entirety, and then see how this process is a cyclic process, how you start whatever location you're working in. This is a process that we ran in Uttarakhand, but it could be anywhere. We've done similar work in various parts of Orissa. I'll be very happy to share those with you, mail those across on how these circular systems work. And finally, even when you put this in place, how there is a governance view of it that is required. you need to understand how panchayats work, how mohalla samitis work in cities, how the ward councils work, how villages and cities operate, for your designs and your plans to be taken up and be accepted and be carried forward by these institutions. And for them to be successful over time, you need to build capacities of these various institutions and individual stakeholders, and you need to then have a communication system that would sustain it and make it happen. I know I've rushed through it. My time is kind of, I'm over time already on this, but I've come back to the slide where I started. It's these three things in principle that I was talking about. Map your resources, then figure out the details of the shelter according to what people aspire to have and they need. And finally, don't lose the larger picture of the settlement plan. The very last slide that I will end with is 2016 Pritzker Prize winning design from the architect Alejandro. And I think in principle, I don't care about the design, but in principle, he called it half a good house. And he said, if the budgets are tight, if the government doesn't have the money, you don't have money, the family doesn't have money, instead of giving them a, somehow matched and tightened and fitted house that they will have to make do with, give them a good house, give them half a house, give them half a good house, and they will then build the other half with their resources and aspirations over time to make it a full good house. So the upper half of the image is half the house, and this is from a project in Chile. Half a house that gets provided to people. The lower image is how over time people, some of them will be faster, will do it earlier, some will do later, but they will complete it to make a good house in their definition. And I come back and I close with, it's important to know what a good house is, what the local community will see as a good house, and how you can be the champion to deliver that. I'll stop here. Thank you so much for your attention, and back to you, Professor Debashri. Professor Debashri, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, sir. You have made very, very relevant points today. Actually, your presentation has been rooted in practical examples. So it is very easy for everyone, including the students who are attending today, to take home some very, very pertinent lessons. That is the best part of it. And thank you very much once again. Now I invite the third esteemed speaker of the day, Dr. Professor Sanjukta Bhaduri. Sanjukta Bhaduri, madam, is a full-time professor of urban planning at SPA New Delhi. She has been the former dean and head of Department of Urban Planning at SPA. She has done her bachelor's from Jadavpur University, master's in city planning from IIT Kharagpur, and doctorate from SPA Delhi in 2003. Madam is coordinator, Design Innovation Center and Center for Urban Disaster Studies at SPA New Delhi. Madam has over 34 years of professional research and teaching experience in the field of urban planning, environmental planning, master planning, local area planning, sustainable development of settlements, smart cities, disaster planning, participatory planning, and many, many more. She is a part of various advisory committees at the national level. Madam has guided many doctoral theses related to planning and design on cities, and is also presently guiding many doctoral students. She has to her credit a book, several technical papers, and articles presented in national and international conferences, seminars, and journals related to various environmental aspects and settlements. Today, ma'am will speak on the topic of widening horizons through. I'm audible now, all of you?
Yes. Can I share my screen?
Yes, ma'am. You please continue.
Okay.
Okay. We are waiting to hear you.
Okay. Has the presentation come?
Yes, ma'am. Presentation is visible now. Your voice is also good.
Okay. So now I'll just put it on the slideshow mode. Okay. So I was saying that we all know about healthy cities. And we all know that why all of us, actually, after COVID, we all know the importance of health and why healthy cities are important for us. And that all residents, everybody has a right, as I was saying, to clean air, need to be in an area where, or need to be in the surroundings or in cities where there are services, there are facilities that one can access the services and the facilities. And basic housing is a basic need. So apart from housing, there are other services and facilities which need to be accessed. So healthy cities, therefore, is one where everybody, all residents, regardless of their background, they can have access to the physical, social, economic, and environment conditions that promote health and well-being. So healthy cities, as you know, is one of those many cities which we talk about. We talk about sustainable cities, we talk about eco cities, we talk about smart cities, we talk about green cities, about livable cities, about safe cities. So in this context, healthy cities becomes important, and we all basically know about this, that how healthy neighborhoods and healthy people also are part of the healthy city. And if we see that the healthy city strategy, the healthy city strategy aims to improve people's health, and there are certain social determinants of health, that is access to healthy food, education, employment, income, early childhood development, the upbringing, the physical and the mental health. WHO has talked of, it's not only about the physical health, it is not only about the mental health, but it is also about the social well-being, whether one is quarreling with the neighborhoods or not. So social well-being is also becomes very important. Then the safe and affordable housing and inclusion. One gets disconnected, one gets discriminated, then in that case, one is not included, one is excluded. And many a times in most of the cities, this happens, that there are people are excluded from the decision-making process, from their voices are not heard, and then all these give rise to crime. All these points give rise to crime. So now therefore we come to the next point. The title was livable city and healthy city. So now what is the livable city? The livable city is also which talks about the quality of life. Now, if they are related aspects, I mean, as I said, we have sustainable cities and various other cities, but everything is talking about 2-3 points. That is, the people have to be healthy, there has to be a quality of life, and the city has to be livable. Then the people also would be healthy, and they would enjoy the city. So therefore, there are what factors make the city livable? Robust, complete neighborhoods, accessibility, local economy. If there are no opportunities for livelihood, then it will basically, one cannot afford anything, and therefore the city is not livable, or the quality of living is not there. So therefore, in terms of public space, so the livable city and the healthy city, I started off with this because then we can see, now I come to knowing this, all of us as planners, designers, architects, we all know this. But what is the status today in the cities? This is the status. There is the homeless, you can see that how a child and a woman who are the main stakeholders to the city, how they are living, how the homeless, they are also contributing to the city, but how they are living. So therefore, if we talk of this exclusion, if we don't understand these contexts of exclusion, it would be difficult for us to address these issues. And that's why I'm saying, knowing all, SDGs, what SDGs have said, that we should have safe housing, we should have affordable housing, but this is the status. We have disparity. One can see you can see the disparity, you can see the inequality, you can see the quality of construction, the quality of life. Dr. Anshu Sharma said that yes, anything, if it rains heavily, it may come down. It has come down. So there are, and in many cases it happens. So therefore, there are issues which are related to disparity and inequality. So there are exclusions. Then unlivable. As you can see, there are unlivable environments. There are unhealthy environments. We are talking of livability and we are talking of healthy cities, but you can see there are unlivable conditions. There are unhealthy conditions. And this is happening. This is one picture, two pictures, but all over the world, cities all over the world, these are happening. And one needs to therefore, knowing all this, then what can be done? We have to see. Then access to basic services. You can see that water, sanitation, access to basic services is how restrictive for many. For many stakeholders, access to basic services is a problem. And how power, which are the basic, again, to live, you need water, you need power, apart from shelter, as I said, or housing. So how power one is withdrawing, or from the poles one is withdrawing the power because there is no access to basic services. And you can see here that the waste, how wastes are dumped, how for one toilet, how children are pushing each other. So, and here also you can see how in a informal settlement, what is happening to the wastes. So this is there in spite of our good aspects of the city, for which migrants come to the city. Migrants are coming to the city with dreams with them. They are looking for opportunities. They are looking for good quality of life. But many a times, this is what is the reality. And then one can see that this is called a health poverty. So what is a health poverty? Inadequate housing. Yes, it is health poverty. Of overcrowdedness. There are many areas where within one room, there are more than 10 people living, 12 people living. So overcrowdedness, unhygienic living conditions, tenure insecurity. This also causes a lot of mental issues, mental health issues. So we are poor in terms of our health. And these are the causes of our becoming poor in terms of our health. So therefore, when we talk of mainly I'm focusing on the housing part because there are various other aspects which are contributing, but I'm trying to today talk about or scope it down to the housing areas, or rather housing as an aspect, as an infrastructure. Now, what is this? When we also talk of inclusive city. We all know, we all talk of inclusive city. But as I said, there are special inclusion. Or special, rather, I won't say inclusion, there's special exclusion. We need to achieve this. We need to achieve special inclusion, but there is special exclusion. There is many people can afford land or housing or services. So it is for all, but many of the citizens are not able to afford all this. Then there is social exclusion. We need to achieve social inclusion, but there is social exclusion. There is, in terms of people, individuals and groups, how they can be part of the society. Basically, there are many a times, nobody knows how many. I mean, we are talking of vending. Can I continue?
If you can put yourself on mute, Santosh sir. Santosh sir, you will have to put yourself on mute, sir.
Mute to kar dechi.
Santosh sir.
Yes. Can I continue? So
you can continue, ma'am. Sorry.
Social. When we talk of social exclusion, many a times we are talking of we have an act which says that every city should have a vending zone. we always say informal sector is creating problems. Informal sector is, because of informal sector, there's a lot of congestion and they are anywhere and everywhere. And but the city, many cities do not know how many vendors, this street vendors the city has. So there are problems of, getting an understanding or a database on such, for such stakeholders. Informal sector is also one of the stakeholders, and we have to plan for them. So this is one example. I'm trying to give an example that how various stakeholders we do not know, we do not have a count. So therefore, when we talk of social inclusion, there are a lot of challenges for social inclusion. Economic inclusion, we cannot mainstream. Many a time that is not mainstream. Therefore, formal jobs, they do not get into the formal mainstreaming, and therefore informal comes in. So when we talk of the city, inclusive city, it is inclusion for whom? It is the inclusion for all the stakeholders who are there in the city, whether it is, if you talk of gender, whether it is male, female, transgender, if you talk of age, whether it is children, elderly, old age, if you talk of income, whether it is urban poor, and if you talk of the other categories, for example, there are various aspects of the stakeholders. I'll come to that. So now here, if we see really that all these economic inclusion, social, these are all, we all know this has to be achieved, but we know also that there is exclusion, which I was trying to say. And if the city really has to be an inclusive city, then the city has to have access. It has to, everybody has to get an access to affordable land and housing, basic services, public spaces, all these, security of tenure, all these, every citizen has a right to the city. And because the citizen is contributing to the city, everybody has a right to the city. And therefore, this is, if you see, there's a World Bank approach paper on inclusive cities, and how inclusivity or inclusive cities, what needs to be done in order to achieve inclusivity in our work. Now, when I talked of housing, one point I have to say, housing is not just about a house. Housing includes the services, the facilities. It is not that one just gives a house to them, to people who are coming in. They require job opportunities. They require educational facilities. They require recreational facilities. They require healthcare. So housing is not about only a house. It is much more than house. And that is a point which I mean, many a times we forget. We say, okay, this many houses are provided. But with the houses come so many other requirements of the people. And we talk of, and then how do we solve? If that is our approach, then how do we solve the problems of equity or inequity in the city? So therefore, these become very, very important points which one needs to look at. So where do we go from here? So considering that there are various other aspects, one can say that housing is a basic need, because that you have seen homeless people in various cities. We have seen people who are in Kolkata. There are rickshaw pullers who are footpath dwellers, and there are various people in many cities. You'll see that people are all they are sleeping in the footpaths. There are problems of homeless. So housing as a basic need for the stakeholders is very, very important. And SDG also, today we are talking of implementation of SDGs, but SDG has also said provision of safe and affordable housing for people, for citizens, or for stakeholders in the city. So now, therefore, housing needs to be what? What needs to be done? Housing needs to be accessible to all. If it is housing are not accessible and affordable, what will happen? Gentrification will happen. We will develop for people, but then the other category, the higher income category will take over. They will just be taken out, and they will be in a position where they were earlier, or much worse maybe. So the one category of people, if things are not made affordable to them or accessible to them. If healthcare is not made accessible, affordable, then in such cases, they will be, they will still always remain the disadvantaged group. Then the resilience and the sustainable. The housing needs to be resilient. Dr. Anshu was talking about that how it was just crumbling down. So what is resilience? What is sustainability? Sustainability, yes, it has to sustain. It has to go on for many years. And resilience, even if there is a I would say a hazard or some risk, then we can build back and faster. So resilience is an important part of housing, which one is trying to look at, that how we should achieve resilience in housing. And then, because many of the times we find that if there are they are not resilient, they'll keep crumbling down again. Then what needs to be done? Yes, there has to be encouragement and engagement of participation. If people do not, or communities or stakeholders do not participate, then how do we know their concerns? How do we know what are their requirements and what they need? So therefore, encouragement and engagement of participation of all communities is important. This is what we call as, when we talk of inclusivity, inclusivity means that every stakeholder needs to be their voices need to be heard. They can today PMAY is talked of the beneficiary-led construction. So beneficiaries are also a part of this entire process, of this entire enabling process. So it's basically an enabling approach. So therefore, this sort of issues can tackle this sort of strategies can tackle inequalities, promote health from a situation is the informal settlements where the video saw the situation. In fact, this contamination, when the informal flooded, in Mumbai, there were people fired because of election.
I think due to some network problem, madam is no more with us. We'll wait for a few minutes for her to log in again.
Why there's a double voice?
Yes. Is my voice echoing?
She is with us. Don't say that word. No more with us is not the right thing to say.
Yes, ma'am is again in the meeting.
Yes, ma'am has joined back. Let's resume.
No, yours is not. But madam's is. Madam's voice is echoing.
Sanjukta ma'am. Ma'am, we cannot hear you. Are you speaking?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Please continue, ma'am.
Okay. So therefore, when we talk of this, and in many cases, we find that when we try to make things or try to try to infuse inclusivity, there are problems of the various stakeholders, urban local bodies who are providing between the communities. There are various stakeholders, various problems of them. Therefore, empowerment, the point which I was saying, enabling or empowering the people, resilience building of the population, if that is not there, it is very difficult to achieve what we call healthy city, which we all know, or livable city, which we all know. But then there are so many challenges on the path that how do we achieve that? So that becomes very important thing to know. So therefore, complete neighborhoods. What is a complete neighborhood? A complete neighborhood is the one which is walkable, which has all the facilities. There's an access to facilities there. So that sort of neighborhoods, is it possible to have now? Because many we can have.
Not a nice thing to say.
What happened? What happened?
No, ma'am, please continue. All the participants, please be on mute. Ma'am, continue, ma'am.
Okay. So therefore, is it how do we achieve this robust and complete neighborhoods? Then accessibility, resilient local economy. As I was saying earlier, also without economic opportunities, without local economic development, it is very difficult to achieve what. So it is not only about social, as those three circles pointed out. It is not only about social. It is about social, economic, environmental. It's about everything together which makes the city, and that one needs to look at. And what is the need of the hour? The need of the hour is a participatory approach, which to some extent PMAY has taken in. That when one says beneficiary-led approaches, and then a participatory approach is the key for plan development. Governance improves because everybody has their say. The city has taken care of everybody's concerns, better decision making. So opinions, views, suggestions have taken it. So enabling approach. Now, what is this participatory planning? Whose participation do we want? It is the residents, it is the employees, it's the market associations, any associations which are unions. So all these we require, their participation we require. Now, how to participate? How do we participate? Either through public meetings or to face interaction, e-participation. Our draft national urban policy has talked of e-participation, of a portal where people can participate, and we have some portals coming up where people can participate and give. But these are all isolated cases. City after city, the entire city or the citizens do not have one portal where one can say, yes, this is what we require and this is what we need to do. And then to give their opinions, needs, perceptions, suggestions, all this. How does one, what do we mean by this participate? What if we have to include people, how then? So this is therefore participatory processes. So at all stages, if we have to formulate need formulation, if we have to talk of housing, then what is the need? How many houses do we make? So it is the need formulation, implementation, in monitoring also. In monitoring evaluation also, people's participation can be there. When we know that, yes, we have a feeling of owning the city, of owning our areas, of owning our communities, then we will maintain it, we will sustain it. So this sort of important things are, so therefore I'll just click. So what are the outcomes? So all this we know that now I'm coming full circle. I started off with what is a healthy city and a livable city. But then I over this presentation, I said that what is the reality and what are the challenges? And therefore there are many challenges. But then housing, because this is specifically focusing on housing, I tried to restrict it to housing. And healthy city is basically to overcome the health poverty, and livable city is to achieve an improved quality of living. So this is these are the outcomes. And I think I have not put a thank you slide because the point never ends. The debates continue. So and therefore I have not really put a thank you slide, because the debate continues. We all know that yes, this is what we require, what we achieve, what we aim to achieve. But then what we cannot do, and or how should we do it? So that's what I wanted to put across today. And sorry for all the disturbance. I mean, it just happened so, because this never happens, this disturbance. But I think I'll stop at this. And if there are any questions, I can answer. Thank you. I've not put a slide though, but I'm thanking you for your kind attention.
Thank you, ma'am. And maybe the possible ways of solving it, and for inspiring us to start our thought processes. That is what is most important. So now we open the floor for questions and answers. And I'll be very obliged if our three speakers take up the questions and answer to our listeners' queries. So the floor is open. I welcome everyone. Whatever doubts you have or questions you have, you can put forward.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes.
Good afternoon, ma'am. This is Anshuman Mishra, architect and planner, associate professor from Pilu Modi College of Architecture.
Yes.
Ma'am, I thoroughly enjoyed the presentation. It was wonderful. I just have a few queries, ma'am. The first thing is that does the nodal agency or the funding agency, does it have any control over the rates of materials and of the labor to facilitate the construction of the houses? First question. I have two small questions, which I'll probably put forth later.
Funding agencies, it depends upon who the funding agency is, because every funding agency has a policy or has a way of working. If the funding agency wants to sort of regulate and wants to see that yes, what sort of materials, what is being used, so that's the nothing like it. But it depends upon it. We cannot have a blanket. I mean, I cannot give you and say that no, they do not do, because it varies from various funding agencies. Each agency has their own rules and regulations if they want to do it, and it also depends upon the scope of the project, upon the size of the scale of the project.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, my second question is that does when you talked about empowering the stakeholders, do the stakeholders monitor? Can they be empowered to monitor the undue or the uncontrolled transformations that the buildings are taking?
Okay.
Like I think that when I buy a chunk of land, I think the sky is the limit. I can build houses because rent is I'm greedy. I want to put that house on rent, and that is a source of income. So can we do that?
No, we cannot, because we are governed by the rules and regulations, the development control rules and regulations. We are governed by that. Unless, in urban villages, which are, and in Delhi, we have these, or anywhere, you have urban villages, which we say it's a Lal Dora area, and they are beyond a certain rules and regulations, or in unauthorized colonies. So they are built. Otherwise, one is under the rules and regulations, under the development DCRs, and one has to abide by the DCRs. Otherwise, and actually the problem is that here we do not have a strong monitoring system. We do not have a, like Big Brother is watching system. We do not have that. Now, if we know that, yes, somebody is monitoring, somebody is that whether, and one can be penalized. And if we would have had that, then there would maybe one would not have so many violations or transformations, which we do not want. But somewhere that those regulations which we have put them down in the master plan, as DCRs, but there is no mechanism of monitoring and evaluation of that whether it is implemented or not. And that's where I think is the problem.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. My last question will be probably, yes, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, sir. Please continue.
Okay, my last question is that
Yes. Yes. I cannot hear you.
Anshuman, sir.
I think, sir, you are muted.
Can I take this opportunity then, in the absence of Anshuman sir? I would just like to make a small, I would like to draw a parallel between Dr. Anshu. In fact, he was mentioning about Alejandro and his half house project, half a good house. So I would like to, I would like to believe that Doshi had tried something similar in the Aranya housing project, where it was quarter house. This was half a good house, that was quarter of a good house maybe, where he provided a plinth service core, which was essentially a toilet, and the option of a built room, which would usually be the kitchen. Dr. Anshu, would you agree with me on this?
Hi, no, thanks for raising this point, a very, very valid input. But, you know, I think there is no right answer to this. A lot depends on how the process is being run, who the community is, what their capacities are. I can also, you know, you remind me of a number of initiatives that had happened in coastal Orissa after the super cyclone of '99, where even, you know, further variations of this were tried. So you may even find 10% of a good house being done by someone where you only set up the frame. I think there was a Caritas supported program in Jagat Singhpur that was doing that. So you give a solid frame, and then at least it gives the skeleton for a family to build around, so that the core structure doesn't collapse. But, you know, as I said, I believe there's no right answer to this. It will vary from situation to situation, and it will be your best call based on the community that you're working with. I don't know if that helps, but that's my view on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So do we have any more questions?
Yes, ma'am, I have a question. Ma'am, if you permit me, I wanted to ask this question to Sanjukta ma'am. Ma'am, good evening, ma'am. This is architect Suraj Mohanty. I'm associate professor from Pilumudi College of Architecture. We spoke about public participation, and one of the parts over there was about engaging the public and how do we get their aspiration before we actually build things. But how do we ensure that public participation instruments actually engage these marginalized communities? And because they are always, the top focus is always about earning more and more livelihood throughout the day. So how do we engage them, ma'am?
There are, in fact, you know, let me come up, when we say, no, they're active all through the, I'll just speak for the stakeholder set, which are the street vendors. The National Association of Street Vendors of India, you know, NASV. So they are working with these street vendors, and in fact, there are people when they really call meetings and get to know their inputs for this. In that case, I've seen meetings, or I've been part of the meetings where many people, they in fact the meetings are held when they are I mean, they can give time also accordingly, and then they are their inputs are taken. In fact, they're in large numbers, they come because they also want their concerns, because they are anyway in they have many problems. So therefore, if they come to know that yes, it is for their benefit something is happening, then that drives them to come in. So that is about one stakeholder set. In fact, we have done a e-participation in an app from SPA, that how to get people into and how to register, and so that saves of time and make it everything would be on their mobile. So it will be easy for them. So when we talk of e-participation, or I was meaning that only, that how we can reach the stakeholders, how would our reach be, and how we can. So that's why but through digital, of course, digital literacy, we know that everybody may not be digital literate, but still everybody has, many of us have smartphones, many of them have smartphones. So then how one can train them and be this. So things are changing, and maybe down the line, few years down the line, one would see that change coming.
Thank you, ma'am. We hope the change comes soon, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Few years now, maybe things are happening fast, so
yes,
it will be very close.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
I would also request Professor Santosh Kumar Mishra to give his views on the deliberations that had been taken up today.
I think this would have been a very good interaction, and a lot of information was I am speaking now.
Yes, sir. So we can hear
yes,
you.
Yes, sir. You are audible. You are audible, yes, sir.
Please, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
Was available, but there is total cacophony because of the internet. So actually the discussion is not is difficult to proceed. So the question that I want to ask or state, I will do one thing. I will speak slowly.
Sir, we can very clearly hear you, sir.
You can hear me.
Yes, sir. Please continue the question, sir.
Is that when we talk about okay. Now the question is that the very idea of inclusiveness originates from our constitution. That is equity. So our constitution says that there should be all persons there should be equity, and from equity we get inclusiveness. We get inclusiveness. So now the thing is that you need inclusiveness in every area of our living, starting from food, housing, education, all sorts of things. Everywhere you require inclusiveness. So when you try to look at the problem positively, you are you get into all sorts of issues, and you sometimes have embroiled into all sorts of things, There is so what I am suggesting is So what I am suggesting is that you look at it negatively. You look at it negatively. What has not been inclusive? What has not been inclusive? What has not been inclusive? Who are not inclusive? Who have not been included?
Should I answer? Should I respond?
Who are not included?
I'll
So that way, just 1 minute, madam, 1 minute. That way, you will get a better idea of resolving the inclusiveness problem. Yes, why not?
I think Dr. Madhuri can answer. I think the question now.
Was this, yes, was this question for ma'am? Sanjukta ma'am, please.
Should I answer?
Yes, why not?
See, as I spoke about informal sector, I also wanted to speak about the differently abled. How many of our cities are disabled friendly? How many of our today the department of from the ministry, they are trying to have audits of railway stations which are disabled friendly and various others. But how many of our cities are disabled friendly? Can the wheelchair move? Can a wheelchair move from the footpath to the metro station? I mean, is our footpaths built in such a way that yes, there is a smooth movement? It is not. In terms of design also, if we really look at our roads, the way our road cross sections, it is not. So the point is that if we go stakeholder by stakeholder, like that's what I was trying to say. Each the informal sector would have their own requirements. The differently abled would have their own requirements. So every requirement, if we try to take into consideration, then maybe one can put them together, and as a planners, as designers, we can have a comprehensive view on, or rather a comprehensive approach towards designing and planning our cities. One example, I mean, you said now another set of stakeholders. There like that, there are many stakeholders, which are the migrants which are coming in. They are another stakeholder. Floating population who are coming in, using the city, I mean, contributing, they're working, going back. So they are also another set of stakeholders. So sometimes, many a times, we do not know how much of floating population the city has. We do not have any estimate. We all know that people are coming, but then how many? How many are in the city at a certain point of time? So many a times we do not really know the quantum of this issue. The quantum of this issue is not known many a times. So that is why it may be difficult for us to address. So have I answered or have I responded? Okay.
Yes, madam. I think so.
Yes,
Dipashri?
ma'am. Yes.
Yes.
Actually,
thank you,
we
ma'am.
have you have overshot the time also today, but one very important question is in the chat box. If anyone, sir or madam, how has the different domains related to inclusive housing has changed in post-pandemic situation? If you could have a very short answer to it. This is from Debashrita, madam. Sanjukta ma'am or sir, Anshu sir. She's asking.
Let me try.
I think Dr. Anshu will.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. And thank you,
Yes,
Debashri. This is a very relevant question. I think very briefly, let me try to take a stab at it, that what has happened in the pandemic situation is that a lot of the social dynamics that we grapple with, even otherwise, they have changed very drastically. We had very clear definitions of who the urban poor are. We had very clear definitions of who the marginalized groups are. And there is a sudden increase in those groups because people have slipped down the economic and the social ladder because of this sudden shock. Now, why this question is even more important is that this is also what many of us are talking about in the future that will happen with climate change. That your current understanding, the past knowledge that we have built, that itself is being put to question. So these are transformative hazard events that change the landscape in which you work. If you look at statistics, you can even Google, you will find that there is going to be a sudden surge in the number of people below the poverty line in these 2-3 years. And that impact is going to still stay. The vaccination program may get over, COVID numbers may come down, but the economic impact is going to stay for years. So here is a constituency, here is a group that you are trying to serve, which is undergoing dynamic changes. I think a very relevant point from Professor Mishra also was, instead of inclusivity, now you start looking at it from the other side. Look at exclusion that is happening. How many people are outside the safety nets, the social safety nets, the economic and the physical safety nets of the safe settlements and housing that we are talking about? So I think it's a very pertinent question. There is no single right answer to it, but the point is that the groupings are changing. We cannot work, it will not be good enough to look at census data, the way traditionally we used to do in urban planning and in housing programs. The census data is drastically outdated. Even before the new census is about to start, there were projections that are drastically outdated. So let's be more live about the people with whom we work is the bottom line for this. Thank you.
Can I add in one point which I thought it was relevant here. Many a times when the cities are growing, we are talking of cities inclusive, we are having the cities developing, projects are coming in, mega projects are coming in. So in that case, people are getting displaced. So what sort of housing options do they have? Today, of course, we have a new LARR Act, and we have the act is there. But really, whether the people who have been, for example, the metro, how many people they have displaced, and whether those people who have been displaced, what sort of housing options do they have? So these sort of issues become, there are varying contexts in the city. And one really therefore has to look at, when we say stakeholders, they are also one of the stakeholders, the project affected persons. So just answering, I was just continuing with what Mr. Mishra was trying to say, that I was trying to say that there are various other contexts and various other stakeholders who, so when we try to list, then in the city we identify, then we can find out, okay, this city, these sort of stakeholders are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam and Sir both, for pointing out such and create such an issue. So today, we are going to end this with a video, but before that, my mandate is to sum up, but in the interest of time, I will be really summing it up in a very few sentences, and maybe if something remains unsaid, the learned speakers will pardon me. Like, first of all, today we learned about the mission and strategies, the vision and mission of the OUHM, that the three verticals around which they are working, which is beneficiary-led construction, affordable housing, and in-situ slum redevelopment. Our scope of understanding as well as knowledge has widened, and the new thinking has opened. So we know that these three things can be a real key to the sustainable and inclusive cities if they are adopted wholeheartedly. Also, the first speaker has given us a lot of indication about the many new acts and many new initiatives which are taken by the government to do meaningful transformation in this sector. then when Dr. Anshul has pointed out very pertinent issues. The thing is that he has pointed out that the context is very important of whatever we are designing, whatever we are doing. The context is the most important thing we should think about. Also, the principles of resources, shelter, settlement, this must be the determinant of the housing solution. And most of all, a good house, he just showed us in a very brief presentation that what is a good house all about and what we must think while we are thinking of providing housing solutions even for the masses. His emphasis on simplicity, harvest mapping, material availability, cycle of material, etc., and the aspiration of people, everything taken together has made our understanding really very meaningful. Thirdly, Sanjukta Madam has started with healthy and livable city. And as rightly said, she has reiterated that the exclusion is the biggest barrier. So the point that for creating a healthy and livable city, we must overcome health poverty. And to do it, inclusion is the key. Then she has taken us through the various determinants of inclusive cities. Both the speakers have actually taken us through an understanding of disaster resilience, how we should make our cities resilient, because this is an inherent component of the inclusive cities we are looking forward to. Also, we have heard about participants' engagement, and as said, engagement in monitoring as well as implementation methodology. We have to work out a mechanism for that, because that is a prime way of tackling the inequalities in our city. And we can build robust and complete cities of tomorrow when we concentrate on the transformations that are taking place, when we concentrate on the individual stakeholders rather than just the data that we often come across. So with due thanks and a lot of learning and enhancement of knowledge, I thank the speakers, and I call for a short video to familiarize ourselves further with the objectives and implementation outcome of PMAY.
मो ना सूर्यमणि पात्र, ओडिशा राज्य खोर्धा जिला भुवनेश्वर म्युनिसिपालिटी 4 नंबर वार्डर बासिंदा। आगुरी चालघर था, बहुत असुविधा होता, पानी गलुला, छुआ पाठ पढ़ी पार ना, लाइन भी नाला, लाट्रिन नाला, आउ सप्लाई पानी नाला। जहाँ घर खंडक पाइकिनी आम मुंड गुंचु टे शांति रही। प्रधानमंत्री आवास योजना घर पाइलु, लाट्रिन पाइलु, सप्लाई पानी पाइलु, करेन्ट पाइलु। एवं आम सुविधार बहुत खुशी अच्छु। ये योजना पे प्रधानमंत्री मुख्यमंत्री की बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Very good afternoon to one and all. It is indeed a very great pleasure for our institute to organize this webinar and contribute to very small proportion to our nation building or national development. For last 2 hours,
I request all participants to be on mute. Yes, ma'am, please continue.
For the last 2 hours, there was a highly illustrative discussion on very important topic of inclusive housing, which is always challenging at all levels, be it international or at individual. The topics that are discussed are very relevant in today's time, and hopefully everybody has learned a lot from that. We in PMC are very thankful to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs for accepting our proposal and giving us the opportunity to conduct this one-day webinar under Awas Par Samvad program. Our thanks to architect Sirisa, who is our engineers and right now lead housing finance of UNOY Urban for coordinating the events. The cooperation of the team of Odisha Urban Housing Mission for organizing the webinar in a very short notice is praiseworthy, and we thank the whole team for the same. The objective of the webinar would not have been achieved without the intellectual deliberations of our esteemed speakers, and we are really indebted to speakers Dr. Sanjukta Vaduri, Dr. Anshu Sharma, and Mr. Partha Sarathi Sahu for accepting our invitation and sharing the valuable knowledge and very thought-provoking information on various aspects of inclusive housing. At PMCA, we are always thankful to our enthusiastic directors, Engineer Payal Mahapatra and Engineer Satyajit Singh, who are very motivating in taking up new initiatives and very supportive in all our endeavors. Our heartfelt thanks to our principal, architect Dharitri Das, for our constant encouragement and keen leadership advice. Special thanks to architect Dipasri Chaudhary for very effectively moderating the session in spite of certain disturbance within the technical system for a very short time within the schedule. Architect Jyotsna Dutta Chaudhary, architect Chitrasan Korida, and Shweta for all logistic support. I thank them wholeheartedly. And last but not the least, all our participants for the wholehearted participation and making this event very great success. Thank you all. See you all in the future for such an excellent. Goodbye.